So now we're going to talk a little bit, we've talked a little bit about how one conceptualizes the self, how you think about yourself as far as most sociologists are concerned. And in this video, we're going to talk a little bit about how we conceptualize of other people and how that impacts what we're doing. So there's a couple of people in largely a symbolic interactionist perspective. So this is Herbert Mead, Cooley. Oh, hello, kitten appearance today. Um, who conceptualize of other people and how our understandings, not necessarily other people in and of themselves, but how our understandings of other people make a difference in terms of how we approach and understand the world. So we're going to talk about two pieces here. One of them is the generalized other, as opposed to significant others, and the other is the idea of a looking glass self. And they're related, but not entirely the same. So the first thing I want to do is go back to the idea of the generalized other, which we introduced in Module 1. But there's a misunderstanding that I need to kind of correct because students often think about the generalized other as someone they don't know very well. So they understand like generalized others as strangers, okay? And it's really important to understand that as far as the symbolic interactionists are concerned, the generalized other is not an actual person, okay? There's no group of people that you can go, oh, this is the generalized other. The generalized other is an idea. And specifically, the generalized other is the idea you have in your own head about how or why other people in your society would respond to a given thing. So it's not an actual person, it's a composite of all of the ways that you have seen people in the society around you react to certain things so that you can kind of predict what society at large is going to say. And that's not a real person, that's a sort of generalized societal reaction overall, okay? And when we talk about the difference between significant and generalized others, that's kind of what we're talking about. We're talking about significant others, sort of the kinds of people that you know on an individual level and whose opinions you care about for a variety of reasons, whether that's your family, your friends, your boss, whoever. But when we're talking about the generalized other, we're talking about sort of an idea that's largely internal about how you think society is going to respond. Okay? So that's our generalized other, and an understanding of the generalized other is a huge part of developing self-concept, because you remember we said that that is part of, like, self-concept includes how one evaluates your traits. And that means that the evaluation you think is going to come from society at large is a really big part of how you start to understand yourself. So the generalized other is important in that sense. And that same kind of idea of like imagining how people are going to respond is a huge part of the idea of the looking glass self. And the looking glass self is largely based on the idea of looking in a mirror. Okay, so it's a process where, as an individual, you imagine how you appear to the world. Okay, so this might mean sort of conversations around how you judge your traits. Are you smart? Are you attractive? Are you wealthy? Are you not wealthy? Like, what is the structure there? So you imagine what other people are going to see when they look at you. Then you imagine how they're going to respond to that, right? And that sort of imagination of how they will respond can be largely dependent on context. So, for example, you might know that there are social environments that will respond to your being wealthy, whatever you determine that to mean, as being really positive, as being a sign of, hey, you made it, okay? But you also might be aware of contexts where that status is going to be less well received. And so you're going, and so the second step of that looking glass self process is imagining how other people will see you, okay? And then the third piece is that you change your behavior accordingly. So you might make a decision about which statuses to emphasize or de-emphasize in a given context based on your understanding of how people are going to respond. Okay? And one of the things you need to understand about that process is that almost all of it is internal. Okay, so you've probably all had experiences, middle school, like grades 7 through 9, really great time to look at this if this is something that you're sort of struggling with, where you think something is going to be a really big deal to all of the people around you. It doesn't really matter what that thing is. It could be a pimple. It could be a wrong answer you gave in class. It could be that you hang out with your parents, that you missed a goal. Doesn't matter. Okay? One of the things about the looking glass self is that because we are imagining how other people are going to react, it is absolutely possible for us to be wrong, right? So you've probably all seen it, whether in sort of your own family or in like the world of after school specials and sort of like pro social messaging. The reminders that like really most people are thinking about their own experiences way more than they're sort of scrutinizing yours. So that's a sort of conversation that we need to have around the looking glass self, is just because we imagine that other people are going to react negatively or positively to a given thing doesn't mean we're accurate, right? Our information about other people and their opinions can absolutely be wrong, but when we talk about it from the perspective of a looking glass self, the argument is that it's not a question of whether we're correct or not that's going to change our behavior. It's what we think is going to happen that's going to change our behavior. So that's sort of the looking glass self and the idea of the generalized other, which is one of the reasons, again, that we talk about concepts of self and socialization being very, very socially anchored, because you don't really get a sense of whether or not you're performing well or poorly in any given role if you don't interact with other people. And you don't sort of get a sense of how they respond. Okay.